All right. All right. Welcome, friends, to the Indie
Lovely.
Game Lunch Hour. We're going to get started. We usually do just like a minute or two here as people join, and then we'll do our formal introduction to the day and begin recording the actual podcast recording. The Today is going to be a community episode. We're going to talk about portfolio best practices, both using them to get hired and using them hopefully to get funded. So no matter what your path is, hopefully this is going to be a valuable episode to you. We will also be doing potentially, maybe it depends on how much time we have in the episode. Live portfolio reviews. You might do one, maybe two. So if you have your portfolio on hand, ready to review, and you're feeling hungry to get it reviewed, maybe drop it in chat. We will definitely do some Q&A. So drop some questions for us in the chat. I guess I'll start my intro. We've got a good number of folks here. Hi, Solar. Hi. Who else is here? Hi, Lewis. Hello. Oh, a few people I don't recognize. Hello, Momo. Hello, Zeno. Hello, The Real Sauce. The Real Sauce. Is there a non-real sauce? Is there an imaginary sauce?
Like a fake sauce.
Yeah. Your mortal enemy.
I
Amazing.
think the real sauce defeated them in melee combat on top of a cliff.
But not if you
And
multiply
now
them together. Otherwise, it becomes imaginary.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Right.
I
Okay.
remember that from maths.
Yeah, maths. All right. Welcome all to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Let's go ahead and do our formal introduction. So before we actually start recording, this is our little tutorial per se of our wonderful podcast. This is going to be about a 45 to 50 minute podcast recording. Normally, we have a guest that we're interviewing, but every once in a while, every 1 to 2 months, Tim and I will do a community episode where Tim and I talk more together, one-on-one, as well as invite the audience to participate in the conversation. So we're going to be doing that today, and we're going to be talking about portfolio best practices in the game industry. Tim here is a recruiter. Wow.
Hello.
So he knows
For my
about
sim.
portfolios. Yes. So it'll be a good conversation. For the sake of the episode, we are going to still have a Q&A section, as always, with this podcast. So if you have questions for us as we go, drop them in the chat like this. Yeah, that was perfect, Tim. We should do that every time. And then mark it for us with a Q emoji. That way we know it is a question. And if you want that question answered, you can also hit the emoji so that we can see multiple people want it answered. For the most part, we'll move through those questions in chronological order. So the earlier you ask your questions, the more likely you are to get those questions answered. If you are on one of our live streaming platforms, hello, live streaming friends. Feel free to just drop your questions in the chat. I am watching the chats from the various streams. What else? We don't have to tell the guest anything because it's just me and you.
I mean, we're the guest, but we already know.
We're
so
the guest.
we can get going.
All right, let's do this thing. Hey, nice. We're already getting questions. Thank you, Joker. Perfect. All right, I'm gonna get the bot in here, and we're gonna start recording this sucker. We haven't done an episode like this in a while. This is good. I'm excited.
No.
All right, and get the soundboard on stage so we can get our beautiful intro playing. Oh, the soundboard did not respond. Come on, soundboard, you can do it.
Acapella.
Oh no, it didn't respond again. We'll try one more time. Come on, soundboard. Oh shoot, I think it's actually like out of service or something. One more time. Oh, but I love our podcast intro. I can't do it without the podcast intro.
You can have to beatbox it, mate.
Okay. I think that is actually what we're doing because it is not working. All right, then let's go ahead and get started. We believe in the soundboard. The soundboard doesn't believe in us. Huh? No, it's out of service. Their servers must be down or something. Poor timing. We're actually going to acapella it. Are you ready, Tim?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let's begin the recording then. I hope everybody is ready to rock and roll. Let's do it. Welcome, indie game adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour, the best indie game podcast on the planet.
Today we're being joined by ourselves to talk about portfolio best practices.
This is a community episode, which we do every month or two, and our soundboard isn't working today, so acapella intro, Tim, let's go.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Indie Game Lunch Hour. Okay.
All right, out of 10, everyone.
Great.
How was that?
Tell us. In our live magical podcast, we give listeners the chance to hear real dev stories from real indie developers, as well as directly ask them questions in the second half of each episode.
This is a recording of a weekly event we host in the Indie Game Academy Discord on Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, so feel free to swing by for the next one.
We're your hosts, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster here at the Indie Game Academy, and of course, the Wizard of Games.
And I'm Tim Wood, founder of Rightfinder Headhunting and the Knight of Games Recruitment. And as I said, we're being joined by ourselves to talk about portfolio best practices.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Every month or two, we like to do a community episode where rather than having a guest on, Tim and I talk about something important together and involve the community a little bit more intimately in the conversation. Today is one of said episodes, and today we'll be talking about portfolio best practices. We'd like to talk about their use, both, of course, to get hired, that is their primary purpose, but also potentially for those of us here who are interested in becoming founders or working with indie studios as a way to help raise some money. So we thought we would start with a little discussion about the state of our industry. Tim, would you like to give us an intro to the state of the industry?
Yeah. Much like my lunch today, the industry has been very spicy and somewhat falling apart for the last few years. I mean, we've some of the latest news, we've seen all of the stuff going on at Ubisoft, and it feels like nowhere is safe, particularly in the in sort of the conventional sense of the old ways of thinking now, where if I get a job at a big company, I'm secure and my job will go on forever. Whereas now things seem to be fragmenting more. We're seeing more indie studios. We're seeing more people going down the contractor path, so that we can all keep living. We're all ducking and weaving. I feel like eventually layoffs will taper off, but I have been saying that for 3 years. So your guess is as good as mine at this point.
Yeah, it really is a wild time. I don't know about the rest of y'all. I'm a millennial, and so I'm really tired of hearing the term unprecedented times. I don't need any more. We can be done with those. Personally, at first I was like, "Ooh, I'm living through history," and then I was like, "This sucks, though." So yeah, the game industry has been rough, and we all know it, and there's no hiding it. And it's been rough pretty much since 2020, which is interesting because 2020 was a real boon year for us. As an industry, we had pretty wild growth. 23% year-over-year growth is a stat that I like to bring up, which is a pretty unprecedented growth for any industry in a single year. And it's because, of course, everybody was stuck inside with nothing to do except play games. But then everybody went back outside, and that with a couple of compounding factors, including sort of inflow of junior talent, and outflow as layoffs started to happen of senior talent, and then also a couple of weird open questions like generative AI now has led to the industry just being this weird, shaky space where kind of nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. That said, of course, it will balance out at some point. The question of exactly how it balances out or what it looks like after it balances out, I think, is unanswered for the most part. There are people with theories. In my opinion, it's actually less safe to aim for working for somebody else now. As Tim said, kind of nobody is safe. We just saw really tragic layoffs happen at Ubisoft, where they are pretty dramatically slashing their talent, and then they've said a couple of weird things about efficiency, and basically it implies that they aren't going to be hiring back up anytime soon. So I actually feel like it is the time of indies once again, where while any individual indie studio has a small chance of success, in aggregate, the winners have already actually proven to be and will continue to be the indie. Look at Claire Obscura, look at Balatro. There's quite a few examples of this already happening. Aggro Crab is one of my favorites as well, with Peak. In aggregate, it seems like those smaller games, those smaller bets, are the ones that are winning out, and that's why we're here at the Indie Game Academy. So maybe can we give? Is there some hope we can give actually before we start talking about portfolios?
Well, the thing is, like, we all talk about the games industry and what is it going to do, what isn't it going to do, and as far as we're all concerned, it's outside of our sphere of influence. But what you can focus on is creating and developing your own skill sets, your own projects, your own portfolios, and maybe even your own companies. and take your future into your own hands that way. It's really hard to get hired right now. You know, I've seen companies that I used to get 20 to 30 job requests from shrivel down to maybe one or two hires here and there. Like it is harder. But the people that have been hired, for the most part, are people that have a good degree of stuff that they've done on their own and use that as evidence as to why they're right for those roles.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at the pathway of getting hired for a job, but you're like, oh, I don't quite have that experience yet, look at the requirements in those job descriptions and just make a mechanic or something that can show you can do those things. And that helps recruiters like me take your profile to the hiring manager and go, talk to this person, give them a job. You know, we're middle people. So although the conventional way of working in the industry right now is pretty hard, if you open up Godot or Unity or Unreal or some other engine and you start making stuff, you're a game developer. You're working in the games industry.
Yeah.
And anything you do will have value because it will either be a finished product at the end or it'll teach you something to help you make that finished product. And that's what it's all about.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. I think the hope is, in my opinion, is in indie. I think that the more AAA, AA, professional air quotes, professional space for game development will settle down. As you said, Tim, I've been saying that same thing for a couple of years. But it is hard to say exactly what it will look like as it settles down. Interestingly, we are one of the industries that is deciding exactly how generative AI fits first. There's plenty of other industries that are being affected by AI, but we're, one of the very first where it is of immediate value to use AI. And so therefore we're trying to figure out, where it fits and what happens with AI. So that leaves us a little shaky too. My hopeful, my North Star is though, people like AgroCrab. They're truly one of my favorite examples right now. And the number of publishing support houses, and in general, like indie development support communities that I have seen pop up. We have people like Amir Satvat. We have people like Cave Bear Games with Ayla Derrick. We have the Blue Ocean Games Initiative. We have AgroCrab. We have a lot of examples of indies who are starting to see some form of success and are actually lowering the ladders behind them rather than pulling them up. They're saying, all right, how can I help other indies succeed in this space? So it is a rough time. The money is hard to find right now in the game industry, both for investment and for just straight up like money, like getting sales, because discoverability is so hard. But the silver lining, in my estimation, is that it is the time of the rock stars. It is the people who will succeed during this time are the rebels, are the people who are like, screw it, I'm going to do it anyway. And also, in my estimation, during this politically interesting and frustrating time period, it is also an act of rebellion to do your art anyway, in my opinion. Screw everybody else. They can't stop you from making your beautiful shit. So anyway, maybe that's my last word. We can stop talking about this. Let's talk about portfolios, Timothy.
Yes.
You're a recruiter. I think you have some thoughts about portfolio best practices.
Yeah. I mean, first things first, I think a portfolio is essential these days. You can't just rely on a CV or resume, whatever you like to call it. But particularly for our industry, people need to see the evidence of your finished product. If you're an artist, we need to see what kind of art you do, and not just the finished article, but how have you kind of concepted your art? What does your work in progress look like? And what does the finished thing look like? A big part of that is so that people can assess how you go about a certain task. But with the increase of generative AI, a lot of studios out there are not into it at all. Some are, but so it's a way to evidence that you can actually do what you're saying you'll do. And that goes across disciplines. If you're in engineering, you might not be able to talk specifically about code structures and stuff if it's under NDA, but you can have a link to a GitHub with the publicly available stuff that you're allowed to have out there. Maybe some written long form kind of, here is a task that I had, here's what I did to solve it, and these are the types of things that I did. So, as recruiters, our role is to essentially be the first port of call for who gets through to a hiring manager and potentially into an interview process. So these days, you tend to get a couple of hundred applicants per role. In most companies, a human being will look at your CV, your portfolio, and make an informed decision based on the briefing they've taken on whether you should go to a hiring manager. Then the hiring manager would look at that profile and portfolio, make a decision on, hey, do I want to talk to this person or not? So if you think of your portfolio as a kind of a repository of evidence to kind of jimmy open the door that you eventually walk through, it's a way of convincing people of your expertise and your skills.
Yeah, interesting. It is a it's interesting to me. Something I've seen happen. It feels on the rarer side, but it happens more often than I would expect. Is people come into this industry and expect to get hired without having already finished some games. And I 100% understand and sympathize with the frustration of junior level jobs asking for like 3 finished titles, published titles. That's sort of that's almost a gold standard. Even a junior level role will say, we want to see that you've already finished 3 games. And I get the frustration with that because that doesn't sound like an entry level job. But the reason that they ask for that is because it's totally reasonable for you to build games on your own time and launch those games in your own time. So one of the things we do here at IGA, the reason that we exist, and one of my own areas of expertise, is exactly that, is launching games for yourself first, because that teaches you so many of the essential skills. It proves your competence in the ability to set a deadline and stick to it. And it, of course, gives you an actual catalog. So you can say, look, here, I built this thing. So perhaps one of the first things I'd like to ask you about, Tim, is what sorts of projects do you like to see people work on? I've seen people do things that are as simple as almost a tech demo. So they're trying to demonstrate their ability to use Unreal blueprints or AI pathing or something, all the way up to, of course, fully finished titles that they're building with giant teams on volunteer squads. What do you like to see, especially those junior level applicants, have on their portfolio in terms of completed work?
Yeah, that's a very good question. For me, and each recruiter is going to be different personally, but for me, I'm quite agnostic. I don't mind if you've got a fully complete game, or whether you're just like, here is a GIF of some VFX that I've done. As long as your execution is solid and you've made it clear to me kind of what have you done versus have you used some assets from a store, which is totally fine. If you're like a real specific niche of artist, I'm not expecting you to do the whole kit and caboodle. What I want to see is clear evidence of what is your high quality finished product, like what is your personal peak and your process of how you've done that. Whether that's a video overview, whether that's some bullet points of what you've done, or if you're comfortable writing something a bit more long form, you you want to help a layperson like me, who is not an expert in tech stuff or art stuff. I'm just good at assessing people. Help me understand how you've got to the final stage, because you're then convincing me that you're the right person for the job, and I'm then going to feel comfortable advocating for your profile to the hiring manager to get you into interview. So don't sit there and think, oh no, I've got to make like a roguelike game, I need to make a shooter game, and I need to make a strategy game, so I've got more chances of getting hired. Like if you're really focused on your niche, show that off in specific projects. You might have a bit in your portfolio which is just like, hey, here's a load of materials and textures that I've made, and I've made them really high fidelity. And in a second bit, you're like, I've done some green work, so I've just got grey box character outlines but some really detailed hair. I've seen a lot of portfolios do very well with that kind of sort of more bitty focused approach, and you can apply that across the portfolios. Like with writers, I'm dealing with a lot of writers right now. Some portfolios are like, here's a cinematic, here are a load of bios and barks, and then here is a remix of an original script that I was given that I was asked to copy edit. It's framing the context so the recruiter can understand it. And yeah, some roles will ask you to have like 3 roles or something like that. I can tell you in the majority of cases, when I'm talking to hiring managers and they're struggling to get the right people, I'm like, hey, so you've asked for 3 games in your requirements, for argument's sake, but this person's got 2 but has everything else you're looking for. Do you want to talk to them? Nearly always hiring managers like, yes. So do consider shooting your shot when most of the stars align for you, particularly if your skill set is a little bit more niche. I mean, there's nothing wrong with shooting your shot generally. The worst that can happen is, I was going to say that they say no, but sometimes you don't get an answer at all. But that is the worst case scenario. What I would advise you to do is to just, if you can make a full game, make one, if that's in your vein. If you can't, or that's not right for you, focus on executing something singular very well and just define your rules of engagement, as it were, on how you've approached it.
Yeah, interesting. A couple of the things that you have said there are things that I am more familiar with, and a couple are things that I'm less familiar with. I want to echo the concept of shooting your shot, because I have worked with so many juniors and people who are just career transitioning or just getting started in games. I get to see an aggregate. Oh, excuse me, Slack messages. I get to see a sort of aggregate of what the typical person does. And one of the things that I see a lot of people do is they shoot themselves in the foot first. They sort of like put themselves in the mind of the recruiter and make an assumption that the recruiter is going to shut them down, and therefore they're shutting themselves down without giving the recruiter the chance to shut them down. So I'll see
Yeah.
people find a job where they're an 80% match or a 70% match or a freaking 50% match, and they're like, well, I just don't have it, I'm not there, so I'm not going to apply for this. In reality, I think having a little audacity, um, and going for it anyway, and really like focusing on the areas of your portfolio and your resume that make you look like a good match is okay, and
Yeah.
even is important. Go for those things where you're not an exact match, and be your own biggest advocate. Allow other people to shoot you down. Don't shoot yourself down.
And I have an example of this. I can't name names due to various data protection policies here in Europe, but there's a candidate that had applied for roles directly with RightFinder and with clients that I'd worked for that I'd never really had a conversation with them, but I was aware enough of their CV and portfolio that I could be like, oh, I know who XYZ person is. And they have recently got an offer now from a studio that I am working with because I heard about their application because I was going through all of the applicants and I was like, oh, I know enough about your work that I know this is good. I checked their current materials out, made sure everything was current and up to date, and I was able to jump on a screening call. And I already had so much context because they had been shooting their shot before, and in the past they weren't right for the roles for whatever reasons, and the hiring managers were saying it's not quite a fit. Try them next time. Whereas this time they have got through that process. Granted, they've had a long period of time of getting jobs, moving jobs, and stuff like that. It hasn't been immediate, and a lot of it is a twist of fate that I happen to be in similar ecosystems to what they're applying for. But if they'd never shot those shots in the first place, I wouldn't have had that name recognition. And we're all human beings in this business. Like we all, everything you do is a touch point of marketing, right? Making sure that you're making yourself more well known and as a known quantity to companies. So it can never hurt. That the worst that can happen is a recruiter sends a rejection mail, or in some cases they ghost, which they shouldn't be doing, but it does happen. I think it's always just a fine balance on how much of that you're happy to do versus, oh, I really want this job, but I really don't feel right about it. I need to protect myself. But recruiters do not want to reject anyone. Like, at the moment, I've got about 28 roles to fill for this contract I'm working. I'd love to put people in those jobs and be like, cool, job done. That makes me look good. It makes my stats look good. But they need to be the right person for the role. So by just adding your application into the mix, if you are a strong but not perfect fit, can often lead to good things. And a lot of companies now that I'm speaking to or working with are really relying on what they call their prospect candidates. So this happens a lot with lead roles. You might interview someone in a few stages and be like, they're not lead level for whatever reason. However, there's an opportunity hire here for a senior or for an expert individual contributor or something like that. So sometimes going for a lead role because you want to be a lead, but you're a senior right now, even if you don't get it, it can lead to something. It could lead to a contract or a full-time job or something like that. I mean, I've got where I am now by just continually shooting my shot. A large part of my role is shooting my shot through business development. It's just a case of making sure that you're always looking after yourself inwardly, but kind of putting enough of yourself out there to fish for those opportunities.
Interesting. Somebody in the chat here mentions networking. Krathik says, "I'll have a point to make. Networking helps because the jobs are filled by referrals even before published on LinkedIn and other job portals." So some of what you were just speaking on alludes to exactly this. I already have this person in the back catalog. I already have them in mind. And as Tim says, by the way, every once in a while you'll run into a jerk, but the vast majority of people who are involved in hiring are looking forward to telling somebody that they're hired. It feels really good to be like, hey, you've got the job. That is almost always universally an exciting moment for the person doing the hiring. So they want to hire you. It's just they also want to make sure their company does well and they can keep getting paid, and their studio doesn't get shut down, right? So they have to make sure it's the right person. So networking, Tim, tell me a little bit about networking, because as I understand it, as much as 4 out of 5 jobs are filled by referral. So what does networking in the game industry look like, and is the portfolio tied to that at all?
Yeah, so networking can take many shapes and forms. It could be as simple as connecting to someone on LinkedIn and striking up a conversation. You might be an audience member in the best damn indie podcast on the planet. You could be doing some courses and learning through something like the IGA. But it's essentially anyone you come into contact with who is in your industry. Or out of your industry. Professional friend making, some people call it. Often I found myself when I'm networking, it's in 2 forms generally. It's generally either client focused, which I won't bore you with because it's not particularly relevant. But that's essentially me going, "Hi, I'm Tim. Let me do stuff for you for money." And the other aspect is candidate networking. So that's meeting with people like your good selves, getting to know who you are, what you do, and how good you are at it, and what's your current level. And invariably, portfolios are really important for that, because aside from building a rapport with people and getting to know them as a human being, I need to be able to sort you into whatever category you are. And that will be, hey, like, could I have a copy of your CV? Can I see your portfolio? Like, tell me what you do. Like, why do you do it? Why do you enjoy it? What are you good at? What are you developing? What kind of role are you looking for? The portfolio is almost like a vertical slice on you. It's giving us that kind of 360 overview of the actual capability of your work that goes beyond you saying, "I do 3D hard surface modeling" on your CV. I'm like, cool, but like, what are you modeling? What are you making? How good are you at it? And then I look at your portfolio and it's a bunch of really well done cars and guns and things like that, and it's either stylized or real, and you can kind of filter things down that way. So you don't have to be going to events all the time to network. Things like GDC or DevCom or Develop Brighton, it can all be online. Some people prefer to do it face to face, which is great. That's you're having a coffee or a beer at a conference. Essentially it's just putting yourself out there, but it's also not kind of being a walking billboard and just demanding things from people. Some of the times I've seen networking approaches have room for improvement are when I've met someone for the first time, or they know someone I know. They go, "Oh, Tim, could you refer me for this job?" And I'm like, well, with the greatest of respects, like I don't know who you are. I don't know what your ability is to deliver. So I'm now being asked to put my own reputation on the line with a company or a person to back someone I don't actually know that well. So I would kind of go into networking without the objective of I want to get something from this person. I would instead think about it as I'm going to let this person know who I am and what I do. I want to learn more about who they are and what they do. And then come what may, something might develop from it. Because everyone you speak to could either be a future employer, they could be a future manager, they could be a future colleague, or they could be a future employee. it could be any one of those things. And you've got the wonderful fifth category of this person could just be a really good pal to have in the industry. Maybe do some game jams together, or just commiserate on a Zoom call now and then with a cup of tea.
Start a podcast together.
Start a podcast, all those wonderful things. I mean, that's how Willem and I met. I found Willem's LinkedIn profile. He was branding himself as a particular Tolkien-esque wizard at the time. So I sent him a joke that just said, "What do members of the Astara use for 3D modeling?" Maya, because Maya is the subcategory of Wizard and Tolkien, and also the software, just with a different spelling.
That's the dumbest shit ever.
I know, and I did that because I found it funny, and I thought Willem will either block me or will just be like, "Oh, that was kind of funny. How are you?" And we've become very good friends as a result. It's led to doing this podcast together and various other collaborations with IGA, and I wasn't planning any of that. I just wanted to waste some time on a Friday.
It was wonderful, though. I mean, I think it goes to show the you never know approach. I think some of my greatest partners, mentors, bosses, for that matter, have happened because of something equivalent to cold calling or something else. For that matter, the job that I have right now, I only got because I wrote a big post about how frustrating it is to have money pulled out from underneath you. For those who don't know, my previous role, which I won't mention where it was, we hit all of our milestones, we hit all of our metrics, and then some. We were past our metric goals by about 30%, 2 weeks away from launch, and we still had our publisher pull our money, and not just pull our money, but bury us. There was no way for us to release the game. And so I wrote a big angry post, and it went semi-viral, and then my current job found me that way. So you kind of never know. And I think really the guiding light is put yourself out there. Be comfortable speaking about your area of expertise. You'll sound like an idiot a little bit sometimes, but more often than not, people will go, "Okay, cool. They have a nice perspective." And yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to folks. Some of my favorite professors at IGA, for that matter, are just because we cold called somebody, and like freaking Victor Blanc, who's art director on Battlefield 2, is like, "Sure, I'll come teach for you." You just never know. So yeah, put yourself out there.
We're all human beings first, mostly.
Yeah.
We've all got that in common, and we've got another thing in common, which is we all love games, or we at least want to be involved in video games. And I think you've already got common ground there, and see what you can build from it. And that might lead to something tangible. It might just lead to something silly and goofy.
Yeah.
But like I said, everything you do with other people, online, offline, is marketing for yourself.
Yeah.
So always conduct yourself in the appropriate way in which you're happy to, and you can't really go wrong.
Yeah, I like what you said about how the portfolio is almost the MVP or the vertical slice of yourself, because it's a chance for us to get a quick taste of who you are. In my experience, we are now running this small publishing arm at the Indie Game Academy called the Indie Game Foundry, where we have our first 3 games coming to launch about middle of this year. Everybody look forward to that. And it's been interesting to be on that publishing side, where we have to make sure that a team looks promising and a game looks promising, and that we believe these games can be launched. And reading through those portfolios is one of the first ways that we did that. We looked at every portfolio of every member of every team to try to find a certain number of skills in specific areas that we were looking for. It's one of the first things. And to make sure that we felt it was realistic, that these teams built what they told us they were going to build. We can look back and see, actually one of the teams is Ludocratic Games, Making the Boxes Alive, which is a physics-based platformer. And we were excited about that game, interested in that game, but we wanted to make sure the team could nail that humorous, difficult, but fun balance that a physics platformer requires. And we went back into their history, and one of the first things we found is that they had already released one of these in college together. And that makes us far more likely to consider working with them. Now, we do have a lot of great questions, so I want to make sure we answer some of these questions. Yeah. Before we move there, let's spend 1 second about using portfolios for exactly that. In this community, a good number of folks want to found one day, or at least work with indie founders as indie developers. So can you tell me a little bit about how the portfolio applies in that realm, Tim?
Yeah, so when you're a founder and using your portfolio, it can take on the form of a standard portfolio. And if you're having a meeting with an investor, for example, you can talk them through, hey, here's some of the outsourced stuff that we've done for other clients. This is the brief that we had, and this is what we've delivered. A lot of people kind of transmogrify their portfolio into a slide deck. And that in itself is just kind of, if you're pitching a game itself, and I'll be very brief overview here because I'm not a pitch expert, but you'll be like, here's our game concept, here's the market research that we've done, here are the elements of our vertical slice we'd like you to have a look at, and this is how much money that we're asking for, which generally I've heard is around the 100 to 500k mark is what most investors seem comfortable with doing right now for like quite polished vertical slices from teams that have come together. But essentially, if you, whether you're doing outsource or whether you're trying to get investment, it's a similar kind of concept. You need to be able to show your capability, what your kind of North Star is in terms of what you want the finished product to be, where you are right now. But they also want to see a game plan of how you're structured, how you're organized, and how you intend to run that pipeline and that life cycle of the game development. So it's broadly similar to a portfolio. They just want to see more of how the sausage is being made right now as well. So that kind of that mindset of I will have an evidential kind of review to show for everything I'm doing. If you can get into that habit now, that will help you if you ever decide to go on that founder journey, because often I've spoken to some studios where they say, yeah, our first pitch, we had no idea what to expect, and we got cross-examined and completely ripped apart because these people were asking us, we're asking them for a lot of money, and they're going, okay, you expect that development will take 5 years. What's going to happen month by month? Or what's going to happen quarter by quarter? You're a team of 4 people doing X, Y, Z, and you think you'll expand to 20. What kind of organization chart are you going to have, and what's that going to look like when you're fully hired, and can you justify why each of those roles exists? So they go into kind of the nitty gritty of it. So to even get in the room with those conversations, you need to convince them that you know your stuff, and that you've got a good plan in place, and a good portfolio practice can be that foundation you can then build on as you become more and more commercially aware and kind of able to can weave and seize on those opportunities as they present themselves.
Yeah, that's great. I can it is less common in my experience anyway that somebody who is considering funding you or working with you in some capacity as a founder is going to look through every portfolio of every team member. It's a little bit less common. If you're getting hired, then absolutely they're going to look at it. And Tim, you can tell me if this is the case, but the majority of the time they're looking at your portfolio, and that's the primary thing they're looking at. For finding money, for getting funded, the primary thing that they're going to be looking at is your pitch deck, and then some version of whatever the game, whatever state the game is in at that point. So a vertical slice is the most common. You've got an example of why the game's going to be awesome. So they want to see that the game is awesome. They want to see that you have a pitch deck that includes where the game is going, what's the plan, etc. And then probably they're going to want to look at finances and metrics. They're going to want to see that you already have some traction and that you can build community and get eyeballs on this game.
Like if building a little Discord and stuff like that, a lot of investors are looking for that kind of thing now. I've heard recently a big one as well is like, how many wish lists are there, or how many Kickstarter backers or Patreons do you have, and all that kind of thing. And that's, I mean, personally, part of me is like, well, that usually comes after. But as people become more risk averse, they expect you to be more upfront and shouldering that hard work first before they'll then part of their money. That might change in the future, but it is a bit of a gauntlet to run. That being said, there's a couple of really great developers out there that are making their own games and they're not seeking investment. They've built a community, and the proof of their vertical slice and the demos that they're putting out are winning over huge amounts of support from people. There's a game called Dragon Twin that I saw on my Instagram, and I checked that out, and it's basically a customize your own knight and dragon simulator. You can sign up on Patreon and get access to it, and I think they're pulling in like a silly amount of money per month. They're probably not going to need any investment. They've kind of, they're that 1% that are doing really well and have pulled themselves up. I found a game on Steam recently, which is basically John Wick, the simulator, called Gentleman's Violence. And that's got a free demo play test out. That's generating some buzz and adding people to their own Discord. And, you know, those kinds of things are really strong proof of concepts. But if you play these games and actually look at them, they're not some polished AAA thing, but what they have got is a core gameplay loop and mechanics that are fun and that get people excited and are often delivering what a lot of people on Blue Sky or whatever are saying, oh, I wish I had a game like this. And someone's gone out and made it and gone, hey, like, help me build this game by supporting me and you can play it. You know, those kinds of relationships are doing, I think, are on the increase and doing very well because people are kind of, I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of a cyberpunk mentality where they're sick of the big corpos and they're like, oh, I'll just support this team of people who are doing a passion project, but that aligns with my passion and we'll go from there. Like I support the Dragon Twin project because I think it's sick. And, you know, it's so far up my street, I can't even begin to explain. So, you know, don't worry too much if you're hearing what Willem and I are saying about investment and thinking, oh, gosh, I don't want to go on that journey. There are other routes to market. You know, you don't have to go to the big money holders because we see the results of some of those relationships over the last few years. You know, always have a cautious eye with things.
Yeah. It is definitely an interesting time for money. As you say, I do believe that not all gamers, but a good chunk of gamers are a little bit tired of the AAA. The narrative has shifted to that. That's why I said earlier, that sort of like Rockstar time period. One of my own mentors and guides here at the Indie Game Academy, a man named Frank Connolly, loves to talk about how he thinks IGA is a bunch of rock stars. Indies are a bunch of rock stars. You know, it's the punk rock movement. And I think that that's true. The consumer is actually a little sick of that corporate mentality and wants to see the indie succeed. That's not all gamers for sure. That's probably not even the majority of gamers. Majority of gamers aren't as invested in the game industry as we all are. But those who are invested in the game industry know what's happening and they love seeing things like Dragon Twin. Now, I think for the portfolio, and then we're going to do some questions here, but for the portfolio in terms of raising money, remember that raising money is always about risk from the perspective of the publisher, investor, VC, angel. They're saying, where can I put my money where it is at the greatest likelihood of growing and at the least risk of declining? And that's why they want to see things like wish lists. That's why they want to see things like a vertical slice that's already fun, interesting, has a great loop. That's why they want to see things like community building, because each of those things proves that the risk is a little bit lower. So what a portfolio does in the aspect of raising money is it helps lower that risk. It helps prove that these people, this team, knows what they're doing, has done something similar in the past. So that's really the main way that a portfolio gets used in raising money. I would say that it is not as directly important, but it is almost like a prerequisite for raising money. Every member of your team should be able to prove that they can do what they say they're going to do on this project. And that's really the biggest thing. All right, let's get to some community questions. We've got a bunch of good ones. So Wendy, I'm gonna start with Wendy's question because it's a good one and it's one that everybody asks. My current question is about gathering things for your portfolio. I am often motivated to work on it, but sadly, I often don't have the right portfolio pieces to make it better. So what do I need? What do I build? How do I get what I need to put together a portfolio, Tim?
Yeah, so it will always come down to what is your niche. I think if you know kind of what the right portfolio pieces are, but you don't have them, the only answer to that really is to start working on them. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have the professional opportunities to do so, maybe consider carving out some time where you can focus on that. And it could be you have an hour a day. It could be you have 1 day, 1 month free or something. But just kind of break it down into manageable chunks and just just work on it. It doesn't have to be a Tony Stark in the cave building the suit in 2 days type deal. It could be just like a little piece at a time, but kind of look for what you think is weak. Maybe ask a colleague or a friend or someone in your vertical. Vertical is what recruiters call like your job discipline. Kind of what they think your portfolio could do with, and work on something to show that. Doesn't have to be a game, like I said before. If you're a writer and you're like, oh, I don't have any cinematic scenes, like, why not rewrite one from an existing game? I've seen a lot of the kind of fan art, fan fiction-y type portfolios do quite well when they've applied for those companies, because they go, oh, here's a character I 3D modeled based on a character from Warframe, for example. That kind of thing can do really well. Maybe have a look at some of the people within your role discipline that you might look up to or follow online. Often you can find their portfolios and see what kind of pieces they're including in there, and the kinds of things that they're presenting, and see if you can uplift your portfolio that way. Of course, you'll have opportunities to speak to recruiters, both agency and internal recruiters. Some of them will give you advice if you ask for it. It depends how busy they are and how inundated they are with requests. But there's a lot of forums and resources out there online where you can get professional feedback from people. A good place to start. I don't know if there's a specific channel in IGA, but the good tutors and professors in IGA are well placed to advise you in the first port of call. But yeah, if you know what you're missing, the only way out is through. I'm afraid with that. There's no kind of magic solution to make stuff happen. But if it takes you 6 months, it takes you 6 months, but you'll eventually get there. So the best time to start is now.
Yeah, there's that old saying, right? The best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago. The second best time is right now. Yeah, I think one of my favorite simple pieces of advice here, Wendy, for figuring out what you should be working on is pretty simple, and that's just to combine a bunch of job descriptions. So go and look for the roles that you want to work. Find 5 to 10 maybe open job descriptions, or even closed ones, ones from the past, but just recent past at least, and look for specifically what they're asking for in those roles. And make a special note whenever multiple people are asking for the same thing. So if you're trying to become a systems designer and a bunch of people are mentioning being able to like simulate a game in Excel, then that's what you should be practicing and putting on your portfolio. If you are trying to become a front-end engineer and a bunch of people are talking about being able to code shaders, let's say, then practice that, build an example project, and put that on your portfolio. And that applies for every single role. You can go and find open descriptions for every single role, and you can look and find exactly what they're asking for.
I'd like to highlight a comment that's not a question, but I think it's important for everyone to hear. But Ashley Shear has said, one of my portfolio games is a tight 23-minute visual novel dating sim, focusing on dialogue and branching choices and one crafting minigame. It's not technically impressive, but it shows I can create something fully contained and scoped. That one game has gotten more jobs than the fancier games in my portfolio. Sometimes smaller but hyper-focused is better. First of all, Ash, well done. That's freaking awesome. But also, you're completely correct. A lot of people might think 23 minutes of gameplay, that's not a lot. That is a heck of a lot of work. Especially, I write branching stuff for fun as well. Like, that takes freaking forever. But being able to plan out an entire scope and show that you can deliver on that will tell me more about your ability to work in a pipeline than you saying, hey, like, here's a game and no further context. So well done on that.
Yeah, I love that, Ash, and that's a takeaway for everybody. So I'm often an advocate for finishing games as opposed to doing tech demos. Tech demos being something like showing that I can do flocking behavior as an engineer or something. But when I say full games, perhaps that's a misnomer, because I'm not saying you should be building a game that has 10 to 12 hours of gameplay, or even 3 to 5 hours of gameplay. A game that is simply startable and endable, has a beginning and an end with a true gameplay loop in the middle, is a finished game. And in fact, one of the things we're discovering as publishers right now is that the games that are doing well are the games that are more like 3 to 5 hours of gameplay anyway. We look at a game like Peak. Peak is a wonderful friend slot game, but ultimately the actual loop is pretty repetitive and pretty short. You could play pretty much everything Peak has to offer in, I would bet, under 5 hours or so. The friend slop genre does a great job of keeping those same 5 hours entertaining for a long time. But you really don't need to get that complicated. What you just described, Ash, sounds like a perfect example of what everybody can aspire to building. A 20-minute game, a 10-minute game. A recruiter's not going to play your 5-hour game anyway. So yeah, just give them a great 10 minutes.
Yeah, like you're exactly right. Like there are some games I'm like, I wish I could play this for 5 hours, but I sadly have a job to do. I can't just play video games all day, which is what I thought the video game industry
I know,
was.
right? Well, that's what they all promised us, wasn't it? What the fuck?
I know, they're just like, do you want to play video games all day? And I'm like, yeah, but
please.
my parents used to shout at me for that. But yeah, give them a great 10 minutes, and it can be short and sweet. You know, that's the key thing here. And if you're working on your own full-length game and you finish that, like put that in the portfolio too. That's absolutely fine. There's a couple of senior devs who have got like lots of games under their belt, and they're like, oh, by the way, I built this full game and I released it on Steam and it did fairly well. Great, even better. But like, you don't have to deliver the world yet. Just focus on showing yourself in your best light.
Yeah, I love it. All right. One, maybe two more questions. I'm going to do Wendy again, not to be biased towards Wendy, but this question got a lot of cues, so I know people want it answered. Wendy asks, from a recruiter POV, how often would you say portfolios actually get looked at? I know this can vary depending on the position, need, etc., but I'm doubting that a portfolio is the first thing a recruiter would go to anyway.
Sure. I can only answer this for myself and the team I work with, because I know what they do. I'm sure there's recruiters out there that are naughty and don't look at portfolios. If a candidate attaches a portfolio to their application, I will look at it. If I'm running a headhunt and I can find your portfolio somewhere on your digital footprint, I'm going to look at it, because that's one of the best ways I can assess your skill. I mean, I'm also going to look at your CV, your LinkedIn, and all that kind of stuff. That's because I'm thorough and awesome. But, I like to know where people have come from, what kind of journey have they been on. That gives me context to assess their portfolio against. I look at the portfolio and then I can make an informed decision based on that whole. But, unless I'm a coding expert and I give you a full top and tail technical interview, I'm not going to know what you can do without that portfolio. So it is very important. Most recruiters, if not all recruiters, do look at portfolios, and if they're not, they should be. So it's always best practice. Have it discoverable. Link it on your CV, your LinkedIn, and anywhere else you want to be discovered online, and always include it in your applications if you can.
Yeah. It's funny. So I can answer this once again for myself, as Tim points out, not for everybody, but myself as somebody that's much more on the less formal side. I'm indie, so we don't have a lot of the time there isn't as well documented or specific of a process as those bigger companies tend to create. But I can say that even when I'm being lazy, the portfolio is the first thing I look at. Resumes are great for a quick tertiary glance. Ooh, they worked there for 10 years. That place is cool. But if I'm trying to really quickly, the fastest I can, if I'm in as big of a rush as I could possibly be, the portfolio is still where I go. Because it tells me so much more about this person's competency and ability to build what I need them to build. And that's what people are looking for. Will this person contribute to this game and make this game more likely to succeed? And where you worked doesn't really say that. What you have already built is what says that.
I mean, when I've run headhunts for something really specific, there was a role 5 years ago that was we want real disgusting 3D organic modeling, we're talking gross wounds, zombie type stuff. So my initial search was all portfolios on ArtStation and other kind of art websites, and I was like, that piece is good. Who's that person? Can I nab them for this job? Same with writing, right? I wouldn't really bother looking at the CV in the first instance. I would read their samples, because I'm like, well, it doesn't matter where you've worked. If you can write and write well and write in a way that would work for this project. That's all my hiring manager's looking for. So some of it will depend on what our brief has been and what we've been told to do. But yeah, your portfolio is only going to increase your chances of being hired, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a huge one. There's two questions that are, I think I would love to finish with. So this one, maybe we do a quick answer. Wesley asks, what is the source for the labor involved with the business side of studio development? I see plenty of programmers, writers, artists wanting to contribute to a specific game and get involved with the studio, but less so founders and people wanting to explicitly found a studio. Is it up to the people working on the game to step up and work on the business side? Or should a group of programmers, artists, writers find a specialist for a business role?
So this is in relation to founding your own studio, I'm
guessing?
Mm-hmm. The answer to that is it will probably depend on what you as an entity want to do.
Yeah.
And also what funding you have if you're doing paid roles, because you can do both. I've worked for many studios where the founders wear many hats and they're doing all those things themselves. They tend to have lower budgets, and the reason that they're doing those roles is out of necessity. Mm-hmm. You can find specialists for the business side of things. You know, if I ever wanted to pack in Right Finder, I could probably get a job somewhere as an internal recruitment manager or something. There are people out there that have never developed a game directly, but they're part of that central nervous system of the companies. And in which case, it's a case of going out and finding them, recruiting them, putting up an advert, or maybe talking to recruiters about finding them. So if you're looking at founding a studio to start with and you don't have lots of funding, or you're bootstrapping it yourself, you'll probably need to wear those hats and train yourself up in those skills.
Yeah.
If you're doing it with a group of colleagues or friends and making your own studio, invariably there's going to be people that naturally wear those hats depending on where their interest lies. And you might have a third-party vendor running some bits and bobs for you, or just finding a way to upskill yourself to cover that initial deficit of skill.
Yep. Yeah. So this brings to mind, this is actually, I'm glad to be mentioning this. So there's an archetype that people will mention sometimes where there are three types of founders. Some of you may have heard this before, and it absolutely applies in the game space. Those three types of founders are: one, you're visionary or you're evangelist. This is something that indie studios never fail to have. This is basically your creative heart. Somebody who is like, this is the game that we're making. These tend to be your creative directors. And as I said, basically you'll never not have this person. Everybody wants to contribute to this role. The second two, though, are also terribly important and make you dramatically more likely to succeed. The first is your builder operator. That's your operations person, your project manager, your person who makes sure shit gets done. This is, in my opinion, probably the thing that lacks the most from indie studios, the role that lacks the most from indie studios, because it's for most people anyway, it's not fun. It's not like, ooh, I get to add a cool new mechanic. It's, ooh, I get to make sure that Tim got his tasks done and ask him why he didn't. That's less fun inherently, and we as game developers are all about what is fun about doing a task. That person is incredibly important, and finding that person is incredibly important. And then your third founding category is your relationship builders or sellers. These are your schmoozers, your people who are really good at finding partners, your people who are really good at talking up the game, your people who are really good in interviews. And sometimes that person will also be your visionary, because they can kind of do both. And oftentimes, especially in indies, you'll fill multiple roles. So perhaps your programmer is also extremely organized and is cool managing a Jira. And sometimes your game designer will be, extremely witty and fantastic in a podcast interview. But oftentimes it's best to have a distinct person for all three of these. So basically a creative lead, an operations lead, and a business development lead. Somebody who's making sure you're getting out there and finding those partnerships that make it happen.
That doesn't mean you can't collaborate together as well.
Yeah.
Like I've seen it particularly at conferences. You see all three together, or two of the three together, and they're just kind of, it's a great partnership
Yeah.
to witness when people get that mix right.
Yeah, I love, for instance, something I have come to finally maybe admit about myself is I am one of those people who loves to be that creative visionary lead, that heart. But I also recognize that I kind of suck on the operations side. So I basically always need a partner who is kick-ass at operations. That person can also often feel sort of unwelcome because it's like annoying to have somebody be like, you said you would do this and you didn't. But what you come to understand once you've worked in this industry long enough is that those people are godsends, and love them and hug them and tell them, thank you.
Yeah.
I did miss this task. My bad. I'll do better.
I had a CEO who was hiring for a chief operations officer once,
Yeah.
and I said, "Well, tell me about the role and what you're specifically hiring for in a CIO." And he said, "Tim, I'm hiring my own boss here."
Yeah.
And like, it's so true.
Yeah.
They keep you on the straight and narrow of it, and they're a very important archetype.
It's hugely important. All right, so I know we're at time, but I think this is a powerful one to end with. So Krethic says, "I have a question. It's not job related. I love video games, and I have done a lot of it, but sometimes I'm losing interest. Is anybody else going through this? What do you think, Tim?"
Yeah, I don't know if this is in relation to playing or making video games, but my answer is similar for them both. If you're losing interest in something, it's totally fine to give yourself a break from it. Like, keep doing what you need to pay the rent or the mortgage or whatever, but like there are times in our life where we can really give our whole self to something and dedicate ourselves to it and live and breathe it. And there are times where you just run out of puff, and it's okay to take a breather, build some space and some grace in for yourself. If you need to take a week or two off something, or perhaps even longer, find what sparks you joy. This is advice that my business partner gave to me, and I'm so glad I'm in this partnership with them because they keep me in the straight and narrow. Give yourself that permission to goof off. If you're kind of at your computer working for hours at a time and you find yourself flitting away and doing this, that, or the other, just be like, right, I'm clearly not feeling it today. I'm going to have 4 hours. I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to do this. I'm going to read a book, or whatever it is you do to kind of de-stress. But it's okay to not be interested in something. You're not a failure. You're probably just tired. Sometimes our hobbies and interests just completely shift over time. It might be that you've reached a point where, like, I don't want to be a game developer anymore, actually. I want to go do something else.
Yeah.
And that's fine as well. You've not lost. You've not been defeated. You're a human being. Like, we don't ask to be put into existence. We just got to make the best with what we got. And your journey is inherently your own. So, as long as you're not doing something criminal, you can't really go wrong if you're making an informed decision for something that's the best for you mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually, if you subscribe to that as well.
Yeah, well said. I think there's a lot of this right now, Krethic. So you asked, are other people feeling this? The answer is yes. I don't have stats prepared for you, but I have seen anecdotally a lot of people who are basically just like, I think I'm done with the game industry. I think what you said, Tim, is very wise, which is basically taking a break is not necessarily quitting. And if it is quitting, air quotes here, then that's also okay. It is a tough industry, much like many of the creative industries like film or writing or music. It's a tough industry, and probably it will only get more competitive over time as there are more and more humans doing it. That doesn't mean that it is bad to leave it, and it also doesn't mean that it's crazy to stay. I know that I personally have wrestled with this a lot, Krethic, and especially in the past couple of months with what's going on politically in my country, in the United States. It's very difficult to feel good about pursuing a dream shot, a moonshot. But I have come to a place personally where it's sort of a screw you, I'm going to do it anyway energy, and that's what's keeping me going right now. And I think my short version of the answer is it's okay if you got to take a break. It's okay if you got to leave entirely. It's okay if you say, screw it, I'm going to do it anyway. It is a tough industry, and it's been tough for years straight now. And I'm so sorry that it has not rebounded, as we all sort of keep hoping it's going to. It is perhaps actually here. Maybe I've said this one before, but perhaps this is what I'll leave it with. I was having a conversation with my dear mother, which longtime listeners of this show know that I mention often because she's a very smart woman. And I was telling her about feeling insecure about some stuff in life. And she said to me, Willem, perhaps that's just life. Perhaps it will always be a balance. And I think maybe that's one of my fundamental answers for all things. It will probably never, or at least if it does, not forever feel steady and easy. And life will always find a way to try to tip you off to the side and mess up your balance. And all you can really do is rebalance yourself, recenter yourself, do what you need to do, including taking a break or whatever, and then get back up and get back at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said.
Your
mum sounds very wise.
She's awesome. Yeah, she was a theater professor for her whole career. She's retired now, cool. But yeah, she's a badass. All right, let's. Why don't we wrap up, Tim?
Let's do it.
How do we wrap up without a guest? Let's see. Before we go, Tim, do you have anything you'd like to promote, or any last words of wisdom?
Anything I'd like to promote? I mean, I'm here every week with Willem at 12 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesdays, so why not come by for the next one? You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Tim Wood, the dude dressed as a knight. One of my passion projects, I'm writing a little web fiction. If you like grimdark, sword fighty stuff, you can find it there. But yeah, the only other thing I want to promote is maybe some extra credit for you all to do. I've got two things for you. We're going to double it up. Number one, if you have a portfolio or don't have a portfolio, work on it. Look at what you could improve, what you could refine and make easier for a layperson like me to navigate and understand. And even if it's 2 minutes or 1 minute or 2 hours, just give it a little bit of love, and you'll be better for it. The second thing, after that last question, I want you all to do something that sparks joy for you. It doesn't have to be turning a hobby into a revenue-making scheme or something like that, but I want you to give yourself permission to go do something outrageously silly, if you're into that. Curl up with a mug of tea and a good book, cuddle a pet, a family member with consent, or whatever. But just do something nice for yourself as well. It's still the dark months. Some people are being beleaguered by 2 foot of snow here and there. So, take this as an instruction from me to do something nice for yourself.
I love it. What a good last message. I will invite people here next Thursday, February 5th, who are listening to this podcast episode after the fact. We are revealing changes to the Indie Game Academy. Don't worry, we're not changing too much. What we have done in the past is still pretty much what we're doing, but we have some revamps that we think all of you will think is very exciting. And we have some ways of changing things that we think will help with some of the core problems of the game industry. So I just dropped a link in the chat, and there will be a link down below in the description if you're listening to the podcast recording to sign up for that event. It's free, of course. It's going to be 30 minutes long, and we're just going to tell you what 2026 looks like for us here at IGA. Last words of wisdom, I'll echo the same thing as Tim. I think there's nothing wrong with doing games as a hobby, and that's maybe one of the important things to say. Make games because you want to make games. The best games are because the people who made the games wanted to make the games, and they weren't doing it because they thought they were going to become millionaires or whatever. So yeah, don't forget that that's the whole reason we're here. We're here to make wonderful things that we want to make for wonderful people. We're not here because we're trying to raise $500,000 or make $1 million. Those are wonderful outcomes that, of course, we all cross our fingers for, but we're here to make wonderful experiences for each other. All right. That's going to wrap us up for the day. If you enjoyed, there's a link to join the Discord down below if you're listening after the fact, as well as for Tim, myself, and anything else we mentioned in this episode. You can catch us again here. I'm just running through the things, Tim, every week, Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern time, and there are instructions to join the Discord. I think that's going to be it. Should we say goodbye?
It. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for joining us today. The soundboard is still not working, so Game over.
Indie game lunch. Oh yeah, it's game over, isn't it?
All right. Bye.
Would you like to restart?
See you next week, y'all.
See you guys.
All right, and those watching the stream, we love you. Thank you for your time. Take care. Hit that subscribe button for us, and we'll see you again next time.